So, sigma is the stress tensor and U is the displacement vector. In fact, I could write this in terms of its components ui, ii. And as I said, the stress tensor could be written in terms of its components sigma ij, and this is a dyadic. So, you can think of U as some kind of deformation. In fact, I can give you an example. So, suppose I take this object and I put a load on it, then in terms of the coordinate system, if I look at the tip of this object, it could go through certain displacements and that displacement would be a vector. One of the components would be aligned with the x axis, the other one with the y axis, and the third one with the z axis. Then we have the body force. So, F is the body force, and this of course we can write as component Fi and II. We can also write down the strain tensor. So, E is the strain tensor. This is again we are going to think of it as a second order tensor. So, just like the stress, it would have these components Eij and the two indices, one of them refers to the face on which it is being defined and the other one the direction. Now, when it comes to the linear elastodynamics, we will consider a very special material. So, you must have heard of the Hooke's law. So, we will use the generalized Hooke's law, which simply says that sigma ij is C I j k l times E k l, whereas these are elastic coefficients. Please note that I and j are going to take the values, if it is in 3 dimensions, I can go from 1 to 3, j can go from 1 to 3. But on the right hand side, k and l are repeated indices. Okay. Of course, EKL also has 9 components, but then we are talking about C, this is a 4th order tensor, and you can see this has about 81 components. But there are some symmetries that we had talked about in the last session. So, let me just remind you. So, there are some major symmetries. So,Cijkl is same as Ckl ij, and thenCijkl is also equal to Cjikl, and Cijkl is equal to Cij Lk. So, the second and third, these are minor symmetries, and this one here is a major symmetry. As far as the strain tensor is concerned, E, we assume that this is given by the symmetric part of the displacement, the gradient of the displacement tensor. So, if I look at the gradient of displacement, notice u is a vector. When I take a gradient of it, it becomes a tensor, but I want to take the symmetric part. So, I add to it its transpose and then divide it by 2. So, this is the strain corresponds to the symmetric part of gradient of deformation, or if you so like, the displacement. In the index notation, I could write Eij as simply Ui comma j plus Uj comma I divided by 2. In fact, by the notation that we have proposed for the symmetric tensors just a while ago, I can replace this in a more concise manner as simply I comma j. So, when I put these parentheses, it means that there is a tensor that I form out of the gradient of u. So, that would be simply Ui comma j. So, that is gradient of u, but then I am going to take only the symmetric part of it, which means I add to it the transpose and then take the average. So, here is what the generalized Hooke's law says, that the stress is directly proportional to the strain, okay. And these here for a linear system would imply that the elastic coefficients do not depend on the strains or the displacement gradients, and that is how we talk about the linear elastodynamics. So, I had given you the strong form in the last class. Let me just review it for you, and then we will go ahead and formulate the weak form. So, the strong form was that given a force Fi which is defined on omega as a real valued function, and then we had these boundary conditions, Dirichlet boundary conditions defined on gamma gi, again a real valued function, and the boundary condition, the Neumann condition Hi, which was defined on gamma Hi, again a real valued function. I was supposed to find a solution u I on the closed domain omega, again a real valued function, such that I will satisfy the equilibrium equation. So, that is a differential equation, and that is simply given as sigma Ij comma j plus Fi equal to 0 on omega. In terms of the vector notation, this equation actually implies sigma Ij comma j means we are talking about the divergence of the stress tensor plus the body force is 0. So, this is a vector equation. So, if I am in 3 dimensions, I can actually write 3 scalar equations for the x balance, force balance, y force balance, and the z force balance. Okay. But in a compact notation, it can be written like this. As you can see, j is a repeated index, but I is a free index, and that can take a value from 1 to 3. In addition to this equation, I have boundary conditions, and they are defined as Ui is Gi on gamma Gi, and the Neumann condition is that sigma Ij Nj is given as H I on gamma J. So, this is the strong form of the problem. Okay. Please recall, we had also done a decomposition for the boundary. So, if this is your omega, we talked about a part of the boundary, let us say this is the boundary which had gamma Gi, and this is the boundary which was gamma Hi. So, this decomposition would be different for different degrees of freedom. So, if I talk about the x displacement, I could have the Dirichlet and boundary condition as the segment shown here, but if I talk about the y displacement, then it could be a different combinations of gamma g and gamma h. So, we have talked about it in the last class. This is the strong form of the problem, and if I want to use methods like finite differences, then I would start from the strong form of the problem and approximate. In a finite element or a finite volume type of method, we will introduce the weak form and then approximate the weak form. So, let us go ahead and describe a weak form and then do the analysis as we have done for the single degree of freedom problem. So, first let me give you the weak form. For that we will have to choose the function spaces. So, let S I be the solution space. So, you can see that my ui, each component is coming from Si. So, either I can think of a solution space which is consisting of vectors, or I can think of a solution space which has scalar functions, and I can decompose my displacement into these scalar components, and each one of them comes from this space. Vi is my weight function space. The proposal is that Si consists of these functions ui, which are h1, and they take a value gi on gamma gi, exactly like the scalar counterpart, okay, where u was a scalar. So, we are treating in fact ui as a scalar function. Similarly, the weight function consists of these wi's. Now, the weight functions are also vector quantities. So, this is one component of the vector weight function such that each component is h1 and wi is actually 0 on gamma gi. So, it satisfies the homogeneous essential boundary condition. Those are your function spaces. The statement of the weak form is the following. So, given fi, gi and hi, as before, as I have defined already in the strong form, so I do not want to rewrite it, I must find ui that belongs to the space Si such that I can choose any wi I want, and for each one of them, so for each wi that comes from the space Vi, I must satisfy the following. So, let me first write it down. And then I will explain you So, this is my weak form where w I comma j is actually the symmetric part of w I comma j. All right, so let me explain you what we have done. The proposal is that given the force vector the essential boundary condition and the Neumann boundary condition as was given in the strong form. I am supposed to find a u that belongs to this space that has already been described. So that this equation which is given over here must be satisfied for each w that comes from the space V I. And the equation is simply that I take a vector w, the gradient of that, but since the product involves a second order tensor with another second order tensor where sigma is symmetric. So, of course, I am only going to be using the symmetric part as I have just shown you. This is of course the force vector, and this term comes from the boundary conditions, which of course we are going to talk about very shortly. So, the proposal is that S is equivalent to W. The strong form and weak form are equivalent, and this again would consist of two parts. So, the first part is where we say that assume that U satisfies S, the strong form of the problem, and we need to show that it satisfies W as well. That is the first part. And then in the second part we will say let U be a solution of the weak form, and from that we would like to infer that it satisfies the strong form also. Okay, so if U satisfies S, then what we already know is that it satisfies the differential equation. So, so I can straight away write that sigma I j comma j plus f I equal to 0 on omega, this is satisfied by my U. Okay. So, what I will do now is take a weight function, multiply it with the differential equation, and then integrate it over the whole domain. So, therefore, this would imply that integral over omega W I times sigma I j comma j plus f I d omega is 0. Let us now look at this term. We will have to integrate this by parts. Okay. So, if you will kindly notice that the second term W I F I, that in fact is intact in the weak form, and it is only the first term that actually leads to two of them. One is on the left hand side and the other one is the boundary condition that comes out of integration by parts. So, let me just focus on this term over here. So, let me write down integral over omega W I sigma I j comma j d omega. This I can integrate by parts, and the first term would be minus integral omega. So, I transfer the derivative on W I comma j, and this is sigma I j d omega. So, that is the first term, and the second term would be essentially W I sigma I j whole comma j d omega. Okay. Now, we know this is symmetric. So, therefore, this product I should be able to write as W I comma j, take only the symmetric part, sigma I j d omega. So, this part is kind of straightforward, and you can already see it is appearing in the weak form. Okay, so that's fairly straightforward. I really now need to massage the second term. So this was a volume integral over omega, but I can now use the divergence theorem. So by using the divergence theorem, I can actually write this integral over the boundary gamma, and this would be the divergence of this quantity. So we are talking about the W I H I. So I would write this as W I sigma I j times N j d gamma, and now I will use the boundary condition. This integral over gamma, I can split it into two parts. If you recall, there is a gamma G I and this is gamma H I. Now please notice my function spaces. My W comes from the function space V I. It is identically 0 on gamma G I. Okay. So this integral is going to vanish on gamma G I, and the only part that remains is on gamma H I. So therefore, I would like to simplify this term even further. I am talking about this term. This would become integral over gamma H I, and then sigma I j N j, as you know, is from the boundary condition, that is simply H I. So I get a term W I H I d gamma. But this has to be done and a summation over all indices I. So I should go from 1 to the number of degrees of freedom that I have. In this case, that is the same as number of spatial dimensions. So this is NSD. Okay, so that's this term. And now what I have shown is that if I want to rewrite this quantity over here, it has two parts. So W I sigma I j comma j, this the first term and then the second term. So let me rewrite it for you. So this becomes integral over omega minus W I comma j, I will take the symmetric part, sigma I j d omega, right. And then the second term I get out of this plus this one over here. So summation I goes from 1 to NSD, the integral is over gamma H I W I H I d gamma, and then of course the remaining part, which is integral over omega W I F I d omega equal to 0. And in fact, this is the statement of the weak form. Okay. So I hope you agree with me. What we have shown is that if U satisfies the strong form, then indeed it satisfies the weak form also. The next part of the proof will be that we will assume that our solution satisfies the weak form, and we will derive the strong form out of it.